Welcome back to another edition of the Gridiron Review. Alongside Bill Wagner, I'm Pete Medhurst. Great to have you with us. Bill, if there was one thing that we have finally established, if there were any questions throughout this high school football season, we now know resoundingly that the top team right now in Anne Arundel County is no question the Broadneck Bruins.
Well, and they proved that last Friday night with a big win over Old Mill. I mean, frankly, shocking when I heard the final score. I was following on Twitter, Bob Hope doing the updates, and I saw that Aaron Dawson had intercepted a pass and taken it back 90 yards to make it 14-7, and that was kind of the game I was expecting. Tight back and forth defensive battle, and then Shane Davis and company just went crazy. How about this Shane Davis? My goodness, what a season he's having. 18 touchdown passes in 6 games. That's obviously, I'm good enough to do the math on that. It's like 3 a game.
Hit for a million the other night for a couple, ran for 3 himself this time. I mean, it's just really been amazing.
One heck of a season.
And the biggest thing, too, is, as you mentioned, after the Dawson interception, Bill, instead of kind of playing it nervously or close to the vest, Rob Harris and company didn't do that. Shane went right back to work and put this football game away. And I think that's the maturity and the football character you want to see in a player. After you make a mistake, how do they react? Do they turn into something else? Do they play the game with a little more fear instead of that abandon you need to make plays? And he did just that.
Absolutely. And I mean, when's the last time Old Mill at home gave up this kind of number in terms of points? Old Mill prides itself on playing tough, stingy defense. And I mean, it is becoming quite obvious that the Broadneck offense is explosive. Got a lot of playmakers, not just Shane. I mean, he's got to throw it and hand it to somebody. Jason Carcamo, you mentioned some of the receivers.
65-yard run for Jason, and then a 2-yard run, so he had a couple of touchdowns as well.
Right. Now, so Broadneck is A-grade legit, and this is a huge win in terms of earning that top seed in Class 4A. And I think we should mention first loss in the regular season to an Anne Arundel County opponent for Old Mill in almost 3 years.
Yeah,
Week 2 of 2014.
Right, been a sensational run for Chad McCormick's team. But again, I mean, right now, Broadneck playing some terrific football. Meanwhile, you look around the county this week, we didn't have as many glamorous matchups on paper, but we had some decent games. And I think one of the games we wanted to keep an eye on was South River and Chesapeake this week. 2 teams that were really peaking going into that game. And let's give it up for Coach Dolch and South River. I know last year there were a lot of people in the community there who don't necessarily understand, you know, what kind of talent they have from year to year, and they were really hard on the South River program a year ago, but my goodness, they've turned it around. They're having a fine season right now, beating the Cougars 28-9.
It's starting to look like South River of about 4 or 5 years ago. They went through a series of coaches, and I think Lance Clellum was there, but for briefly and left. I mean, so Eddie needed some time to get his feet on the ground. He comes from a coaching family.
No question.
I believe it's his uncle was Dave Dolch, the
Correct.
great coach that coached at Bowie State and Morningside College. But, a very, very well-known athletic family, the Dolch family. One of his relatives is in the Anne Arundel County Sports Hall of Fame. John Dolch was a wrestler at Salisbury in Northeast. But, he's doing a great job. They did suffer some tough losses in that game, though. Their quarterback, he got injured and went out. And then the little running back that we were talking about last week, he also got injured. So,
but to me, that's the most impressive thing about them winning this game.
They lost their quarterback and their starting running back, and
kept right on going. I think that's the most impressive thing about this. And I mean, let's face it. Sometimes, and we see it all the time. There are a lot of communities where they expect just because the name on the school that you should be great every year no matter what. Sometimes you just, again, as we talked about it last week, in public schools, you just don't get a cycle of kids sometimes that are very athletically inclined. That's what's happened to these teams from time to time. Probably what's happening in Annapolis right now. You had such a great player in Cameron Hugh. You don't necessarily have that caliber of player. Kids are trying. It's not that they're not putting forth an effort. The coaches are trying. But this year you see a team like Annapolis the other night, kind of life and death with Northeast. But eventually Panthers do enough to win it by a score of 18-15. Amarad White from 2 yards out with 1:08 to go to win it for the Panthers.
Right, well, and that's one of their playmakers from last year. And, haven't really seen much out of him this year. He's one of those guys that does need to step up. for the Panthers. A huge win. I mean, Northeast is tough. They're another team that is really improved. I mean, they're playing people tough. I mean, Northeast and South River both went through some down years, but this year both are vastly improved. So that's a good win. Another surprise to me that Glen Burnie taking out Severna Park. We had talked last week about that being one of those toss-up games. These are the teams that are in that middle pack. Annapolis Northeast, Glen Burnie, Severna Park. Those are games between that mid-level of teams. And that's a huge win for Glen Burnie.
Yeah, David Cates with 181 yards, also 3 scores on the night for Glen Burnie. And kind of surprisingly, Severna Park at times has put up some points this year. They're sitting at 1-5 right now. It's still a little bit of a surprise by the Falcons, and they're not going to be
a pretty good team.
They're not a bad team, right? They're not going to be an easy out for somebody the rest of this regular season. But the Gophers winning it by a score of 19-14.
One thing we should mention about that, shout out to the 1967 Glen Burnie team. They held a 50th year reunion as part of the game the other night. They honored them on the field. Guys like Ed DeGrange, who was the Rhodes Trophy winner. Our friend John Pilley, who ended up playing lacrosse and football at Navy. So got to give it up for the 1967 Glen Burnie Gophers, who went 9-0. I guess they didn't play 10 games back then. They probably didn't have enough teams in the county.
Schools back then.
Right, there weren't that many teams. And
there was no South River back in 1967.
Well, they said that their big win was over Annapolis. That was the one that really clinched the unbeaten year. But got to give a credit to those. And, kudos to Glen Burnie High School for welcoming back their old, great players and honoring them. I thought that was a really classy event.
And look, all these schools, whether you're public or private or whatever, but especially public, because your public schools, it's all about your community, right? Where you are, where your boundary is. That's your community.
Right.
And I don't think any of these schools should ever lose sight of that.
No, you got to remember your pride in school, and you got to remember the great people. We talked about Annapolis High School created a wall of fame, and they honor all their former great, not just athletes, but people that came through the school that went on to do great things. All these public schools should remember the people that came through their school and then went on to success. Like Pete Medhurst. They should have a wall for Pete Medhurst at Southern High School.
Not yet.
Special wall with a plaque.
See, Joe Miller and I, who do the Navy games, we were having a conversation with somebody, and the person said, you and Joe might be the 2 most famous people from Southern High. And I'm like,
I heard you say this on the radio.
It could have been until the brothers Osborne decided to start singing.
Right.
And they're doing it pretty well.
If you and Joe could sing, maybe you could.
That's not happening. I tried to rap on the air last week. I got 3 good verses out of it, but that is about it. Arundel gets into the win. Colin Ryan Sedgwick throws for 3 touchdowns, 40-12 over North Carolina. Darius Hunter with runs of 4 and 26 yards. And Arundel doing what they need to do, sitting there right now at 4-2. And again, you want the math to keep looking your way as long as it can. And right now, Arundel still very much alive in terms of that math headed into the final weeks of the season here.
Don't count out the Wildcats. Great coaching staff. Chuck Markowitz, he's a legend. He's a Hall of Famer. He will get Arundel playing better football as the season goes along. And as you mentioned, they're right there. That this region playoff race is still very much up for grabs. Meade is really making a statement. They put up another big victory this week. And right now, I believe it should be Broadneck-Meade now, with Old Mill taking its 2nd loss within the region. I'd have to go look at the points. But
so you'd have Old Mill, you'd have North Point, Old Mill, or Broadneck, Old Mill. Yeah, I mean
Meade's probably right in there somewhere.
Meade's at 5-1, probably number.
I'm thinking they're 3 behind North Point and Broadneck. Yeah. I think they may have gone over Old Mill with Old Mill taking its 2nd loss, but big win for Meade.
Meade 37-14 over Southern. Elijah Martin throwing 2 touchdowns, also an 80-yarder in that game to Amari Sims. They are now 5-1. Darian Strawn running for a couple of touchdowns in that game for the Mustangs. Over on the private side, Severn, man, what a story this has been so far. 6-0 as they beat the Murray School by a score of 41-24. Craig Stevens throwing touchdowns to Jake Lilly, Dylan Greger, and Jacob Yaros and Henry Rentz in that game. So right now, this is as good as a Severn team as we've seen probably in quite some time.
I agree, and when it's going to send us scurrying to the history books to find out the last time Severn went undefeated. I think you're probably going back to 1982 Beaver Petty days. Yeah. They had 2 guys that went on to University of Virginia. Tailback Howard Beaver Petty was a legend. Scott Chapin was one of the offensive linemen, also started for Virginia. So I think that was the last Severn team I remember that was, but I may be missing one. There may have been some, but this is Dwayne Tyler got to be in serious consideration for Coach of the Year with the job he's doing. First-year coach has the Admirals undefeated, and they are just playing some terrific football.
No doubt about it. AACS beat St. John's by a score of 9-8. Thaddeus Stanfield with a 72-yard catch, and Jack Rossiker kicking a 38-yard field goal to win that game for AACS. Good to see St. Mary's get back on the board over John Carroll, 40-7. Donald Day leading the rushing attack there with 153 yards on 26 carries, and the Saints right now sitting at 3-3.
Yeah, well, and they've got a winless Archbishop Curley team on the schedule this week, so you would think maybe they can start putting something together. I've had one of my former St. Mary's classmates needle me and say, "Why are you not picking the Saints?" And I said, well, for 3 straight weeks I picked the Saints and they lost. They were killing me. I've got a reputation.
You kind of did the reverse psychology to help your alma mater.
Well, then I pick against them and they go out and win. So this week I will pick the Saints over the winless Archbishop Curley, especially since that's Jerry Jackson, my former boss's Curley
Saints,
grad.
Friars,
I always pick the Saints over
Who's stronger, the Saint or the Friar?
I don't know. I don't like either. But anyway, enough of that. But St. Mary's, big win. And, I'm being told that St. Mary's should win their next 4 games. That's what my...
Kyle Hill, 12 of 16 for 152 yards, also threw a 25-yard touchdown pass to Ben Lehman in that contest. So, again, I mean, we obviously Spalding has been the toast of the private school scene here of late. But, man, you got to give it up for Severn School getting off to that 6-0 start. And, again, that's been a roster through the years, Bill, that's not been very deep in terms of numbers.
Right.
So that puts the school behind the 8 ball from the get-go. But this is great to see them getting off to such a competent start there. So another week of high school football in the books coming up. Bill and I saw one for the ages in Annapolis, while Maryland saw an instant replay against Ohio State. We'll talk about that and more when we return on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. We'll start in Annapolis where Bill and I were, and Bill, as Navy Air Force games go, we know A, they're going to be intense. We know B, more often than not, they're going to be relatively close, and you're going to have to score points to win because since 2003, the winning team has scored 27. I believe it's in like 8 of the last 10 games in the rivalry. We got all of that on Saturday. The path that we got to it wasn't quite maybe what we expected. Mids up 31-10, 38-17. And then all of a sudden, here come the Falcons. And with 1:53 to go, Navy looks up and they're losing 45-41. But enter Archbishop Spalding's Zach Abey, and the Pasadena passer went to work, and he got the Mids a victory. Unbelievable game, 48-45 over the Falcons on Saturday.
Well, that had to be a memorable game for you to call, Pete. And, it really was an unbelievable change of events. Navy seemed to have this game in hand. And out of nowhere, as you mentioned, the Air Force just hits these big plays. You got Arian Worthman's running up the middle of the field for 52 yards, and then bing, dart down the middle of the field for Marcus Bennett for, what was that, 50-some yard touchdown? 50, it's just amazing. And all of a sudden, at minute 52, and it's like the crowd just went silent. Like, what just happened here? This was a celebratory atmosphere. We're putting it on Air Force, and got to give Zach Abey credit. We go to Navy practice and they do the 2-minute drill. Multiple times during the course of the week, they work on the 2-minute drill and they've got it down. And so, you talk about option teams can't drive the field in 2 minutes. And I saw a tweet you mentioned that Air Force and Navy, how many drives?
9 scoring drives in this game under 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
That's unbelievable.
9.
Right. So the myth about the option teams, can't get the quick strike is wrong. Obviously, now Navy would prefer to chew up the clock a little more, but, you can't help when you hit a big play. And Malcolm Perry busts loose for 91 yards. You're not going to turn it down. Navy, we should mention, unveiled a new offensive strategy, which is going to make them, as if preparing for the triple option is not enough. Now Navy can run the zone option, which is, taking a page out of the New Mexico playbook. And I think that's really what led them in that direction, is that Air Force has handled Navy's triple option pretty well, defended it. Last year only gave up 57 rushing yards, whereas New Mexico's been torching the Falcons with their zone option. So Navy pulls out the zone option and runs it to perfection. So now you're just listen to Mike Norvell on the American Athletic Conference teleconference, the head coach at Memphis. He's like, Navy comes out in a completely different set. Yeah. Now, so this really gives some opponents something to think about. But impressive performance. And Ivan Jasper deserves a lot of credit for developing that game plan, implementing that game plan, getting the troops to be able to run his own option in a short period of time. And his son, Jaron, was at the game. We've talked about Jaron Jasper, who's waiting a heart transplant. He's been in the hospital for 2 months. And what a lift it was for Ivan Jasper to walk into Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium and see his son there. It was huge. And I texted with him on Saturday night, and he just said, what a great ending to a great week for my family.
Yeah, I mean, I was with them when they entered the stadium and sitting next to Jaron as he was sitting there in his wheelchair waiting for the team to come in. And I know there wasn't a dry eye in that tunnel. Every Navy coach, every Navy player came by, giving him a fist bump. Yeah. And, of course, his dad gave him a huge kiss and a hug and a warm embrace as they went out to get ready for play. Meanwhile, Maryland gave up 62 points to Ohio State last year. This year, Maryland gave up 62 points to Ohio State. Problem here was the offense couldn't stay on the field long enough to give that defense really any rest, and Ohio State just executed at a very high level on Saturday and blasted the Terps 62-14. Max Bortenschlager with a concussion, the latest Maryland quarterback to suffer an injury. And, hey, last man standing in the quarterback room gets to play this week against Northwestern.
Oh, that could be Caleb Henderson, it looks
like. Which was
the
guy they originally wanted to start at the beginning of the season, and he was hurt.
Right, well, and I don't think he's really fully healthy. I mean, they kind of had to put him in there out of desperation.
Hey, they could always go back to Shane Cockrell.
Yeah, well, he got suspended. He didn't show he wasn't at the game. He may be done because that's a problem. He's a 3 strikes you're out guy.
Yeah,
he was suspended last year.
He's had multiple issues.
Right. So, I mean, Maryland's just not in the Ohio State category. It's just that simple.
Not quite.
They're not there with the elite of the Big Ten, the Penn States. I think you're going to see a similar score when that game comes around. They're not there yet. With
you don't think James Franklin wants to rub it in on Maryland?
Oh, he does, big time.
Slightly.
So, Terps, right now, a bowl game, being able to beat some middle of the pack Big Ten teams like a Minnesota. This week, Northwestern, they got to win that game. Mm-hmm. At home, Northwestern, you got to beat them. But, I think that's where they are. Right now, you got to hope to be up in the middle of the pack, but they're not in amongst the elite, and that game showed it. It was totally outclassed.
And the problem, the swing game for them last year was Michigan State. Michigan State, of course, beating Michigan this past weekend by a score of 14-10. So that puts another roadblock in Maryland's way to 6 wins as well coming up here down the stretch. Minnesota, of course, turned around after losing to Maryland and lost to my man Jeff Brom and Purdue this week, 31-14. When we come back, we'll take a look at the pros. Redskins were off, but the Ravens were not out in Oakland against the Raiders. The Raiders going with E.J. Manuel. That's usually a winning elixir for the team playing them, and it was for Baltimore. We'll talk about that when we come back on the Gridiron Review. Ravens went to Oakland, no problem. They faced the backup quarterback, and hey, how about this? This is a winning formula. If your quarterback doesn't throw any interceptions, you may have a chance to win. Joe Flacco, Bill, he stopped putting those checks in on the M&T Bank commercials for a few minutes, threw a touchdown pass instead of an interception.
You're all over him with that commercial.
That's what I'm making fun of because the folks at M&T Bank do a great job. It's just poking fun at Joe because he's got all that money. But he didn't turn the ball over. Shocker, Ravens win.
Right, well, I think it'd been like 11 straight games he had an interception.
If you don't turn the ball over, you're going to win more than likely.
Well, I mean, Joe Flacco was under fire. I mean, the bottom line is a lot of people were wondering. I mean, his quarterback rating was above Deshaun Kaiser, is the only person below him, a rookie for the Browns. So that's pretty bad. And, people were really wondering what is going on with Joe. Is this back injury worse than we thought? How is he completely healthy? Got to give it to Marty Mornhinweg, the offense coordinator. He came out and threw the bomb to Mike Wallace right off the bat, and I think that gives your team confidence.
Why not take some
Why
shots?
haven't they been? That's the question. They've been most conservative
part of it is
game
offensive
plan.
line giving him time, but you're right. It has been a very conservative game plan, and let's face it. I mean, their running back situation, clearly Terrence West has fallen out of favor, and again, I think it's his fitness. I don't think he's in shape.
Yeah, he may be very well
Buck
be right.
Allen and Alex Collins ran the ball very effectively for the Ravens on Sunday.
Collins got hurt.
Yeah, of course.
I mean,
shocker, another injury.
Right. Oh, they needed that win big time, man. On the road, and Oakland's a very competent team. Not quite sure what's happened to them this year.
Well, I mean,
not
Derek
the team
Carr's
that were
hurt
last
now.
year. Well, yeah, we don't have Derek Carr. But they still got a very good offensive line. Should be able to run the ball a little bit. I mean, And bottom line, Baltimore needed that victory big time, and to put up the points they did is a real confidence boost for an offense that was under fire.
Turns out to be a huge win because Pittsburgh loses to Jacksonville by a score of 30-9 at home.
Right, Ravens are tied atop the division.
Steelers have some significant issues right now and might be Ben Roethlisberger as one of them. Last Monday, of course, we tape on Monday, so the Redskins game had not been played. Redskins with a mighty effort against Kansas City, inches away from what would have been a go-ahead touchdown. Instead, they have to settle for the tying field goal. Chiefs go down the field, eventually win it. They had that late touchdown when the Redskins were trying to lateral and everything, and and the Chiefs win at 29-20. Chiefs back it up by beating the Texans last night, so they're now 5-0. But I tell you, Washington's showing that, hey, they can hang in there with the NFL's elite, and maybe they're going to have something to say about this NFC East going down the stretch. Cowboys now at 2-3. Washington playing San Francisco, who's 0-5, coming off the bye week. 49ers lost another close game, this time in overtime to Indianapolis. So Washington got to be feeling pretty good about itself, despite no Josh Norman now for 4 weeks with the injury.
Yeah, that's a tough loss. Yeah, I just was so disappointed because, I do know that Kansas City is one of the best teams in the NFL this year. They've proven that week after week. But, man, the Redskins had them.
Josh Dotson had the ball here, had it here, and, of course, as soon as he hit the ground, you just saw kind of trickle out from underneath.
If he wants to be a big-time receiver, you got to hang on to those. Those are the difference between an elite receiver and just a middling receiver.
That's when you got to have that body control when you're in the air to make sure that you roll so you come down on your back so the ball stays right here. Take that into mind, young kids watching. Go up there and get it, bring it down here, and land on your back. That way it doesn't come out when you hit the ground.
I just felt like this was a game the Redskins let get away, and it would have been such a huge victory on the road against such a great team. And
I feel pain coming from you.
It just hurt because I thought it was going to be a great win, and the defense killed itself with these penalties. How many KC drives did they keep alive?
Oh, it was like 6 penalties
jumping
on
off
defense.
Sides and doing stupid stuff. It's just,
Hands
I don't know.
In the face.
Again, I was listening to Doc Walker and Brian Mitchell and those guys, they're former Ray, and they don't want to hear this great effort stuff. You had that game and you let it get away, and I don't want to hear about how great Kansas City is. If you're a great team and you're winning, you got to finish, and they didn't.
It's a great grimace you had.
All right.
I felt the pain. Grimace is my
favorite.
favorite.
I hope they get back on track this week.
Grimace is my favorite McDonald's character, too. So I love the word grimace. It's really cool. Hey, youth football winding down. We're getting closer and closer to playoff time now. As we close in on that, go to aacounty.org. Check out the team schedule so you can see when the top teams are playing each other down the stretch. Old Mill having a great season. Multiple teams that are still undefeated right now this late in the season. A lot of their home games over at Randazzo Park. Very easy to get to. Pop in there on a Saturday and watch some of that action. Again, you can get all the schedules for all the weights and all the classes at aacounty.org. Go to Recreation and Parks page and pull up the team schedules. That'll do it for us this week. Our thanks, as always, for you taking your time to watch us. We'll be back again next week with another edition of the Gridiron Review.